Hello.
Hi, Rebecca, it's Beatrice.
Hi, Beatrice. It's Rebecca. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. I'm wearing my sweatshirt with shoulder pads.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, I quite like shoulder pads at the moment.
Oh, well, that's an interesting development.
And you can take them out when you wash the sweatshirt.
That is also very good.
Yeah.
So they don't warp into weird forms.
Yes. Yeah, no, you can take them out.
And what colour is your sweatshirt?
It's black.
Chic.
And it's got a very narrow blue stripe around all the edges.
Nice.
Yeah. So I'm feeling okay.
And do you feel authoritative, but relaxed and slightly punk?
That's exactly how I feel. How did you know?
I just felt the vibes coming down the phone.
No, that's exactly how I feel. Thank you.
Well, you know that I still have my ringtone for when you call me is Blondie Atomic.
Oh,
so that seems very
nice.
Appropriate for your outfit.
Yeah. So now I feel even better.
Good.
What about
I sometimes think I'm also wearing a sweatshirt, but it's not as exciting as yours. It has got slightly puffed sleeves going into the cuff though.
So there is into the cuff. Interesting.
Yeah. So it's navy blue, but then there's just a bit of fullness there. So I don't know how we're going to define that, but that's what's happening here. I do love sweatshirts.
Oh, me too.
Oh my God, there's nothing as good as like an absolutely perfect, completely plain sweatshirt with tailored trousers. Oh, yes.
And they're not that easy to find, I find.
They're not.
No.
Men's are often better than women's,
That's true, yeah.
You can find like nicer, completely plain ones that are men's, I think.
Yeah, and the material is important.
Oh, it's really important. It really is. No, I do. I have many sweatshirts, and I love each in its own way.
Yeah. And what else has been happening?
Well, obviously, sweatshirts takes up quite a lot of my mind.
Yeah, mine too.
but I've also, this week is the week with my MA course that we focus on the Second World War, which I also always find is really like difficult and fascinating at the same time. So on Monday we were talking about, like the stuff that I've done on like bomb site photography, like Beaton's fashion photographs, but also documentary photographs, and how they're kind of choreographed, but also documentary and theatrical and horrifying. And we were talking a lot about all the kind of tensions as well within how women were supposed to act and present themselves, and how it kind of magnifies ideas of femininity and the problems of femininity, because we were looking at American sportswear and like the popover dress, the McCardle popover and Vera Maxwell jumpsuit, and sort of designs which were created in response to the war and for women who needed to be more active, even if it was still within the home. But then at the same time, there's this push for like beauty and duty, and this like sense that you have to look glamorous for the men.
Yeah, and some of the wartime features, like the hair is
extraordinary.
Yeah, looks time consuming.
Well, yeah, and I guess because it's like you can't ration hair, so it's. I suppose it becomes such a focal point because it's one of the few things you can be really extravagant with and not be seen as unpatriotic. Because it is quite extraordinary the way it gets piled up at the front.
Yes.
That's what I always kind of find fascinating, because it's almost like creating a hair tiara.
That's
like a pageant tiara. I mean, not a kind of little diamond one, a big ass tiara. And it's quite a strange shape. I suppose it's giving height. It's quite theatrical. I don't really quite understand it myself.
No, and it's weird. I watched this film from 1947, and there is a scene, so a bit after the war, so there's a scene where in the morning the woman is doing her hair, and it looks like she had overnight, she had little pins in it or Kirby grips or something to make it into little curls. So no curlers, but something else. And she takes all these things out and then she brushes it. And it's weird to have these sort of curls at the front and then you have a bit of a straight. And then you have the curls again at the bottom. That's what I find so weird. This sort of curl and straight combination.
My mum once did my hair because I was so fascinated by what it was.
Oh, really?
It really didn't suit me. And my hair does not take well to you trying to curl it or do anything like that. So it didn't last very long. But you kind of, you divide it up into small sections and then you twiddle each one. Like you twist it round and keep hold of it. And then you let it like curl onto your head. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
And then you do two hair grips on each one in a cross shape to keep it clamped down on your head. And then you have to wrap it with a scarf so they stay in place. And then when you wake up in the morning, it is quite wild and free when you take all the pins out. And then, yes, you comb it. And then because it's now got curl in it, you can kind of shape the curls where you want them. But as when I decided I wanted to see what a French pleat was like, and I spent months growing my hair, had a French pleat, decided I didn't actually like French pleats, and then just got it all cut back off again. I think it's best for me to just stay with short hair and not mess about because it doesn't work.
Although I do admire the experimental spirit there.
Well, you know, it's brief with me in terms of hair, but it happens occasionally. But yeah, it is very extraordinary. And I also watched this film that I'm going to show the students later called The Gentle Sex. Have you seen it?
No, I haven't seen it. You mentioned it before and I tried to find it, but I haven't yet.
It's from 1943 and it's really fascinating because it's like a really strange mix of quite documentary elements and fiction. And it's called The Gentle Sex, and like the beginning, the sort of what you call them, like the beginning titles are like fake, like samplers, embroidered samplers.
Oh, really?
And there's all these things about the gentle sex is so sweet and lovely and fine and fancy and la 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 la. But it's quite ironic because then it's showing you women really being tough during the war. And it begins, it's like directed by Leslie Howe, the actor. And you never see him, but you do see a man, like the beginning of it is you see a man, it's quite creepy, looking down on a London train station, and he says, "Oh, look at that girl, that little sweetheart, she's one we should keep our eye on." So it's all a bit like, ew. But he goes through and he picks 5 women out of the crowd. And it's really interesting because they're each like a kind of archetype of femininity. So there's the kind of little tiny woman who's a bit mousy, and there's the kind of tough one who works as a waitress and has got her boyfriend with her, and there's the kind of repressed middle class woman. And you know, it's sort of interesting how they do it, and it's interesting how they're dressed because they're most of them in variations on a suit, but the suits are quite different. So like the one who's meant to be a bit brassy, hers is like colour blocked and a bit Adrian, as in Hollywood Adrian, not my Adrian. And she's got like a little dangly brooch on and, you know, a little cute hat. And then another one, the one who's meant to be mousy, has got a sort of dark, neat, quite kind of military style suit. And there's some with like big sort of swingy coats. So you see all of them, and like some of them have their mothers with them, and their mothers are wearing furs, but you can really see they're like 30s furs that they've had since before the war, and like little hats that look like they're pre-war hats, the mothers I mean. So that's really interesting. And then like they get the train and they meet up on the train, and then they're going to join the ATS, so it's like watching them turn from civilians into service women.
Wow.
And it's really interesting because I don't know which training camp they went to, but apparently it's real military personnel who are the extras. So it's really interesting that you're seeing actual army women with then the actresses coming into their realm.
And do you think, so was it like a propaganda film, do you think? Was it meant to get more women to sign up? Or
I don't know how much it was like literally one. I don't know about whether there was government involvement in sponsorship or whether it was just generally at that time that you took that line in films. I don't know. But it's very, there must have been some government involvement to film there. But it's really interesting, and I think it's really moving. Like, there are some bits which are a bit hard because given what we know of what happened, where they're very optimistic at times, and you're thinking, oh no, this is all going to go so badly. But the bits that I think are particularly interesting in terms of dress are like when you're introduced to them and the contrast between the 5 women, but also between their mothers and them. But then even more so, it's really fascinating because, you see them going to the mess, not the mess, like whatever you call it, to have their lunch.
Like a canteen type thing.
Yeah, and kind of them responding to the food that they're being given. Like, to some of them it's like, oh, you're given a lot and it's hot and it's yummy. And to some it's kind of, what's this disgusting slop? So there's a kind of class divisions between them and their kind of reactions, and also their reactions to being away from their mothers and being away from home, because obviously they're all quite young. And clearly for some middle-class women, they've already been to boarding school, so it's not that strange to be away from home. Yeah. But then they go to be issued with their uniforms, and that's just because I find it so fascinating, like the sort of clothing becoming administrative and bureaucratic, because that seems so the reverse of most of what we look at in fashion, that I find it very interesting when it becomes this bureaucracy where they've just got shelves and shelves and shelves, and it's very utilitarian, and it's like there's a list of, you get X number of blouses, you get X number of each element of a wardrobe, and it was really interesting to think of it that it's the same time, like the 30s is when you get the beginnings of the idea of capsule wardrobes in America, and it's kind of interesting to think that already exists really within the military, that you have your capsule wardrobe of adaptable, and how I was a bit concerned they only got 3 pairs of knickers. I'm feeling that's not enough. No. That's not enough.
And how different, because presumably their uniform is some sort of suit.
Yes,
and
exactly.
Is it quite different from the suit they come in?
I think it's like the fabric obviously is really different, and it seems more fitted. But that said, one of the big things they kind of make a joke of is how you're given what you're given, and then there's like them trying to swap amongst themselves to try and find things that actually fit. So, and there's kind of interesting shots, like there's one of them who is trying to fit into this skirt that's just far too small for her, and there's the contrast of her khaki wool skirt. I'm obviously projecting that it's khaki, it's a black and white film, but she's pulling that up and she's got like nice black silk cami knickers with lace compared to this army fabric that's being pulled up. And the little woman who I told you about, she is put in a series of far too big coats and jackets, so there's like the comedy of her being swamped in this uniform, which also seems to have some kind of symbolic meaning as well. But it's just really fascinating, this idea that you're metaphorically transformed through this. And it's also like, like in the Marie Antoinette film and in real life, if you were royal, when you reached the border, when you were going to marry the king of such and such place, you change into clothing from that place and you have to take off everything. And it was making me think of that as well, of like that you completely do away with your civilian self and you become this new entity, except you are still yourself, but you're in uniform.
Yeah.
And the other thing I really liked is they show you their kit for looking after their clothes. And I must pause it and write down the things, because there were things that I wanted to ask you what they were, because there were lots of things to do with buttons that I was thinking, I don't know what a button stick is or a button brush. Should I have a button brush?
I don't know either.
Maybe it's just if you have brass buttons, you need a button brush.
Oh, but maybe, yeah.
You see the women who are issuing the stuff, they're like behind the counter, and it's just like a counting exercise, and they sort of lay out a series of brushes and things, but those are all for taking care of your clothes. Because I suppose it's also the principle, like you're not really or in the olden days, you weren't meant to.
You don't dry clean it or you wash
stuff.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, you brush it. So I guess it's that. But it's also that kind of ritual that you're given all these things. You become, to become this other version of yourself. But taking care of those things is also really embedded in transforming yourself, like the rituals of cleaning and polishing and being checked each night and that kind of thing. I found it really interesting.
I wonder why in the film they did show it in that much. It sounds like they're showing it in a lot of detail.
Yeah, well, I think that's the thing, because there were like points where I was thinking, is there a story in this film? And there is, because obviously you're following the 5 women, but you do get an enormous amount of detail, and it is like, it's one of the few things that's not a strict documentary that I've watched that I've really felt like I could understand a bit more what it must have been like.
It sounds fascinating.
Because I think 2 or maybe 3 of the women end up driving lorries, and you really get the sense, like you get a lot of shots of them just on the road and then arriving somewhere and they're completely exhausted and they haven't eaten and their orders have been changed, so they just have to get back in these great big lorries and go off somewhere else in the middle of the night. And there's kind of that sense of you just do what you're told, and how physically tough you have to become, but also mentally tough within all of this. And also that, one of them is sort of involved in a romance, and there's kind of like one of the women really bugs the other women, so they don't want to be with her in the same posting, but they can't really do that much about it. So you get the kind of personal and relationships side of it, but it's also a lot of coverage of just what it was like to do that and what the different elements of it are, which I think is really interesting.
How does it end?
Well, it just ends with them. It ends with them firing, not like handguns, like I think they call them ACACs. Like I don't know the military terminology, but like firing at planes and bringing down a plane.
Oh, okay.
And I mean, obviously they're in this country, and then so they've had this really tough night, which they've all reacted to in different ways. To kind of be the first time of them being involved in something like that. And then it's like them the morning after going and queuing up to get a cup of tea and a sandwich, and as each one comes up, you hear the narrator again who you heard at the beginning saying, she's learned this, or she'll continue to do that, or maybe it'll be hard for her now. So it doesn't end in the way a conventional film was, that there's not a kind of denouement or climax to anything. It's just you have this sense that they are in this, and it's just going on and on and on, and it's really, I found it fascinating.
It sounds absolutely fascinating.
Yeah, I'll lend it to you. I've got the DVD. But what's the 47 film you watched?
Well, it was called It Always Rains on Sunday, and
I feel I've seen that.
I'm sure you have. I think it's a very well-known film, and it seems like in 2010 or thereabouts it was in cinemas quite a bit, and it is very interesting also because it's also about the role of women, and the main character is someone called Rose in the film, and she's played by someone called Googie Withers.
Oh, I've heard of her.
Yeah, so it's an Ealing.
Has she got blonde hair?
Well, in this film she actually has dark hair, but in the one scene she has blonde hair. And to try and cut the long story short, so she had an affair with someone. That's when she was still blonde, and you see that in a flashback with a very good-looking man, but he was a crook and he goes into prison. So then she marries this 15-year-old man, and I think in real life she was 15, yeah. In real life, 1-5. In real life, she was about 30, and I think that's probably what she's meant to be in the film as well. But that's one of the things.
How is that even legal?
But this is one of the things that is sort of weird, because all the women look much older than it makes sense that they are for the film to work.
Yeah.
But I guess that's the makeup and the hair of that period. So she marries this nice, dull man called George, and he has 2 young daughters who are sort of in their late teens, early 20s, I reckon.
So you're saying 50?
15, 1-5. So she's 30 and the husband is like 45-ish, roughly.
Oh, I thought you were saying the man she married was 15.
No, he's 15 years older.
Than
15
her.
years older, yeah.
Okay, this is a different film now that I can understand and is legal.
Yeah, no, it is all fine.
I was worried as to where we were going.
No, that's all fine.
Okay,
he's just, so he is her lover before was sort of her age, so there is a difference there now. And she has these two young women, you know, who are not that much younger than her to contend with, and they don't really get on. But anyway, her former lover, Tommy, he breaks out from Dartmoor and he suddenly appears in what they call the Anderson. So they have this Anderson shelter in the backyard, which they just call the Anderson. So he appears and he just wants her to give him some food before he sort of tries to escape further. And it doesn't end well, as you can imagine. But there's several side stories as well. But the interesting thing is it's set in Bethnal Green. It was actually not shot. The street where this particular family lives was apparently in Camden. But you do see bits of Whitechapel, and there's quite a long scene on Petticoat Lane Market, which is really fascinating in terms of the clothing. There's a black man, there's quite a few Asian people, which I thought was interesting, and it's also quite a lot of Jewish people in the film, and I'm still not sure how they are portrayed, but I think sensitively from what I can tell, and there's quite a lot of Yiddish spoken. So in some ways it is a bit of a cliche of the East End life, but
also showing that there was diversity.
Yeah, but also the interesting thing is she is just always making food. You know, she's always, and you can tell she's just really bored and unhappy. And then when this Tommy suddenly appears, she sort of thinks back but obviously this is not going to go anywhere. So in the end, she stays with her dull husband. But in terms of clothing, the sort of Petticoat Lane scene is really interesting because they're all sorts of different clothing. But one of the daughters is a pretty one who, well, they're both pretty, but one is the bad one. You know, she has her eye on a saxophone player who was married, and there's several scenes with her in her underwear, in her slip, and there's a dramatic scene where Rose, the stepmother, tears her dress off her. And
oh my God!
So they're all three of them, Rose and the two daughters, are really well presented the whole time. So I also think you can tell they don't have much money, but they're not, you know, shoddy or shabby or anything. That they have very nice dresses, which I think at some point you get the impression they make themselves, but they're very nice and everything. You know, it's a well ordered house, albeit small. So that was very interesting, but also these sort of different choices that women have, and also for 47 it was quite, while she's not someone very likable, and no one really is in the entire film, they all have their issues, or they all do things that are not nice, but she's still, I think, portrayed sympathetic. You sort of sympathize that she might dream of escape. So
I mean, I think it's such an area. This is something else I was talking about with my students, that I think it's such an interesting time, those kind of 5-ish years post Second World War, where it's really difficult for men and women to kind of work out how they fit back into normal, in inverted commas, life after what they've been through, and that they've been through completely different things. They've been apart for a really long time, but suddenly they're back in the house together and told they have to become gender stereotypes. And how does that happen when you've been through what you've been through?
Yeah, it's interesting, the war, apart from the Anderson, and at some point she needs to get some blackout material from the Anderson. to fix something.
Oh.
So that they talk about that, and then you see there's a car chase, and there's some of it, I think, like the Petticoat Lane scene is actually shot in the studio, but there are actual outdoor scenes. And so you see a bit of what, at one point I interviewed a teddy boy and he called it debris. So bombed out houses where they played in, they always said, oh, let's play in the debris. And so you see some of that, but they don't actually talk much about the war. And the life that she's left behind was actually working as a barmaid in a pub. So I mean, I watched it quite late, so I might have missed some things. I watched it quite late at night, but I don't think the war weirdly features much.
But I guess you wanted to move on from it, maybe.
And also, 47, I think, and the film came out at the end of the year, but I guess it seems to be like more August, rainy season or autumn. 47 was a really hard year, apparently. I think the winter was absolutely awful, but they don't talk about not having food or having to cure anything like that. That's not the theme.
But I suppose there's like some films that show you how things are and some that are an escape, and it seems like this one is kind of pitched somewhere between the two.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's always so interesting when you see films from the late 40s and early 50s, when there's just gaps in cities where there's bomb sites still, and it's because I think I don't know, I always find it so hard to imagine what it was like, and there's really interesting documentary footage of people walking to work in the city, and it is just like bombed out buildings. It's like that's everything that they're walking through. And it's so weird that becomes your normal life almost.
Yeah. And also how long it took. The teddy boy, he was talking about the early 50s, I think.
Yeah. I mean, because rationing goes on until, is it 52?
Early 50s, yeah.
Yeah. No, it's really shocking.
Yeah.
But I'll definitely lend you The Gentle Sex, because I think you'd really enjoy it.
Yeah, and if you, I only got the DVD. I borrowed it from our local fantastic DVD place.
Oh, goodness, yes.
So I can't give it to you.
Find it somewhere.
But yeah, it's really definitely worth watching.
Yeah, it sounds it. It's really interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're thinking 40s.
Yes, we're thinking 40s. Maybe that's where the shoulder pads come in.
Maybe.
Maybe.
Possibly. Okay. Well, I'll be interested to know if you're still in shoulder pad mode next time I speak to you.
Okay. I will let you know.
Bye.
Speak to you soon. Bye.
Bye.